Hi, everybody. Okay, so just for the purpose of the recording, thank you again for joining, for listening in. My name is Tony, and I'm a member of the IARPC Secretariat, and happy to be with you all today to discuss IARPC, the Arctic Research Plan, and specifically how they relate to risks and hazard topics. So here's a look at our agenda today. I just kind of ran through this for the folks on the call, but mostly wanted to reiterate that a bulk of the session is an opportunity to discuss, hear from you all, just so we can bounce around ideas on maybe what we should be thinking about, including focusing on for the next Arctic Research Plan when it comes to risks and hazard topics. So hop to the next slide. So before we dive in, I know some of you are aware of this already in terms of what IARPC's mission and function is, but for just anyone who might be a little bit newer, a little bit of background, IARPC is an interagency working group of the National Science and Technology Council, and we are tasked with enhancing research in the Arctic by bringing together federal agencies to coordinate and enhance their work. We also facilitate conversations and build connections among federal agencies, researchers, Arctic communities, and others who live and work in the Arctic, both in the US and internationally. So to do this, we bring together leaders from 18 different agencies, departments, and offices across the US federal government. And on the next slide, you'll see this is our homepage of the website we run, IARPC Collaborations, where we facilitate that collaboration between federal agencies and non-federal groups and researchers, those with interest in the Arctic region. So we currently have over 4,200 members at this point, spanning different disciplines and agencies and organizations and countries. And you'll see on the site, for those of you who are a member, and if you're not a member, we'd love to have you. But we host a number of different teams, including risk management and hazard mitigation, who's hosting this webinar today. And like I noted at the beginning of the call, once I complete this overview portion, I'll pass it over to one of our leads to kind of give a high-level look at the team. And another slide in terms of background. So IARPC was created in 1984 under the Arctic Research and Policy Act, or ARPA. And this act called for a comprehensive national policy focused on research needs and objectives in the Arctic, which IARPC is required to update every 5 years. So the work of IARPC and IARPC collaborations is organized around this National Arctic Research Plan, which outlines specific areas for collaboration amongst U.S. federal agencies and researchers. So we're currently implementing the Arctic Research Plan for 2022 through 2026 and seeking input on what that next plan for 2027 through 2031 should look like. So I did put links in the chat earlier for the current plan, but maybe I'll pop those in the chat again in case they're not showing up for anybody who joined a little bit later. But yeah, in this meeting, we're not going to go too much more in depth on the current plan and some of the details there. We did host a webinar back in September where we get into the more nitty-gritty there, so I'll put that link in the chat. But yeah, again, more of the goal of the meeting is to reserve some time for that discussion. But just to give you kind of the timeline of where we're going, that's the word, for the development of the next our Arctic Research Plan. On November 15th of this year, we actually closed the Federal Register notice soliciting input on the next plan. But due to the government shutdown, which took place over that time, this listening session was rescheduled. So any input that is shared during this session will be equally considered for the next plan, as well as we have a plan at iarpiccollaborations.org email that I'll put in the chat that is also still active, that as a result of this listening session, if you wish to submit written input, you can do so by sending it directly to that email address. We do just ask that if you do submit written input, we'll need it before the end of this month, before the end of the year, as beginning in January, the federal drafting team is going to come together to start considering the public and federal input and actually create the first draft of the next Arctic Research Plan. And once that draft is developed and goes through, a review and clearance process, it's going to be released again to the public, aiming for late spring of next year for another round of public review and comment, and then the process will repeat. Drafting team will take in that feedback, return to the draft and create a final version of the plan that we're hoping will be then reviewed and cleared to be released in early 2027. But if there are any changes to that timeline, we'll communicate them as proactively as possible. And so, like I noted at the top of the call, we had a couple of Arctic research plans listening sessions that were rescheduled due to the government shutdown, several taking place this week. So outside of today's meeting, the final listening session that is like still to come is actually a town hall at AGU next week. So Tuesday, December 16th. And that'll also be an opportunity to hear from a couple team leads and then, like we'll do today, have a discussion on what we should be thinking about for the next plan. And then finally, just if you're looking for more information or you have any other questions that we don't end up answering today, we do have an ARP update page where we add information on the process. So that's the link on the screen. I've also put it in the chat. And that plan at iarpiccollaborations.org email that I put in the chat is also a good place to send any follow-up questions. But we've got myself and Serena on here today. So just before I pass things over to Tom for that look at the risks team and their work, I just wanted to pause for a moment to see if anybody had any questions on IARPIC, the Arctic Research Plan. Yeah, anything we can clarify before we move forward. But again, we do have resources available if you want to dig a little bit deeper.
I have a quick question.
Sure.
Thank you for putting the links in the chat. Does IARPIC maintain kind of a lessons learned register for IARPIC related work?
So like a kind of repository of any feedback we've gotten on like general operations and structure.
And evaluation reports, etc.
Yeah, we do compile, maybe this is not exactly what you're asking, but reports to Congress where we kind of summarize and highlight like the work that we've done in executing against the plan. And then we will, for this input period, the next input period, when we do get public comments and input, we do publish that on our website. So it's like this is the input that was shared with us, so folks can kind of like see what was shared, see how that came through in plan drafting and updating. Um, Serena, is there anything I'm missing that might kind of speak to this report of feedback or best practices or lessons?
We do like internally have feedback. Like we do periodically like ask for feedback from people who engage with IARPIC, and we do have that information. It's internal, like we use it to kind of work plan. And then like specifically, for example, when we developed the last Arctic research plan, we did do an evaluation on like how we did with community engagement and like local engagement and had like we have that document that we've kind of pulled tasks from. And our certain things have changed with our team and like funding and capacity since the last go around, so things, we haven't been able to fulfill everything there, but it is something that at least internally we track and try to improve
Great.
upon as best we can. Yeah, and
And
happy
then
to chat
leads
more
into
about it.
the new plan. Okay.
Yeah,
Thank
yeah.
you. Mhm.
Yeah, and thank you for the question. I think it's always good to be like, even outside of the plan, like, are we hearing feedback? How are we incorporating it? And especially like this year in particular has been a little uncertain, and it helps us adapt when we kind of like can hear and know the feedback and like how does that mesh with whatever the current circumstances are. Um, so appreciate the question. Thank you. And I think with that, I'll pass things over to Tom for a look at the risk management and hazard mitigation team. But if anything else comes up, again, we can return to it in the discussion, or you can definitely pop it in the chat. But Tom, I'll pass it over to you.
You can't hear me on my phone?
No, we could hear you just now when you came off of mute. And then there was a little bit of an echo, so it does seem like the phone's definitely connected.
Okay, I'll try it on my computer, but my network is really unstable, so it might break up. I am on the phone. I don't know how to get the phone verbal to work, but I guess we'll try this. Cool. All right, thanks everybody. Again, I'm sort of representing a group of people here, and we've been meeting and working on this topic I've been part of it for 5 or 6 years, and I know it started before I got involved. So that IARPIC's been kind of a neat way to share information. I will say it can be a little inundating with websites and IR collaborations and the different PDFs and the meeting. And it seems like a lot. There's focus areas and there's action teams and there's different topics. One way to look at it, the positive way to look at it is there are lots of ways to collaborate and play and share information, which is fundamentally our goal, right? The goal is partly to, well, let me try that. *6. Okay, can you hear?
Hmm. No, still not hearing on the phone. No, the phone doesn't seem like it's working, Tom, but the video was.
Okay. All right. I'll just try this. I'm okay. Lots of ways to collaborate and share information is kind of the focus of that. And so our group, as you can see here, I will say we started meeting before these typhoons were happening. So we were kind of thinking about fire and flooding and permafrost thaw, earthquakes, landslides, coastal erosion, sort of tsunamis. Alaska and the Arctic kind of have a little bit of everything. We don't really have hurricanes, but we apparently now have these former typhoons slamming against the shore. So since Merbach in 2022, and then of course Halong recently, that's been kind of inserted into our lexicon. Next slide. And so starting out, people probably remember there was a 2018 statewide threat assessment that was done. A select number of villages, and it was sort of river and coastal erosion a little bit, and permafrost thaw, and it didn't really include southern or southeast Alaska or southwest Alaska. I'm not even sure that much about western Alaska. So it was a great start, but one of the things we sort of started talking about in kind of 2018 to recently is can we update that? And so some moves have been afoot to update to add some of these newer threats to expand across the state and even to think about compounding threats. And you can get a little crazy with this, but imagine, an earthquake during a time that people maybe are dealing with their school is threatened by erosion, or a lack of communication, um, different ways to kind of match that. So tabletop exercises, we've thought about doing some of those. I think we never quite got there. We talked about it last summer as something to sort of think about this fall or winter. I think the shutdown and whatnot challenged that. But I think that would be a neat way to kind of go through some of this to expand this sort of level of assessment. Next slide, please. And so a really neat thing that Anna Liljedahl sort of spirited and others have been really supporting, which is great, is this speaker series. And I think we've got more plans starting in I guess what, January, Tony and Serena. I think we kind of punted because of vacation and whatnot, but
Yeah.
you'll see the planned ones for spring. And I think we have room for new other added people and topics. If anyone here or anybody knows somebody that might be good to do that. You'll see the ones we did last fall on the right and the ones planned in the spring. And a lot of these are just ways we're very federal in terms of who's on some of these teams and whatnot. But of course, universities, state, tribal entities are doing a lot of really cool stuff. So a goal of these series is to kind of pull everybody together in that regard. So with specific questions, I would contact Anna, or you can contact me and I can forward you along. Yeah, that's fine. You can go to the next one. Thanks. And so, yeah, kind of, are there certain topics or risk management, et cetera, concerns in your community? I mean, sort of like this sort of move towards a discussion of I don't want to say something like, are we missing something? Because I feel like we're very additive, so it's not subtractive, but are there topics and things? I see wind speed and damage level. Yep, and winds. That's not something we've thought about too much. Lots of places in Alaska do get quite windy. But I don't know about this hurricane scale. I mean, does ADAC get that on like a normal Tuesday? Or is this extremely rare everywhere? And I don't know if someone can answer that, but maybe not. Okay. Anyway, yeah, wind is one that was not on my list, and obviously extreme wind events are something to think about as well. Is that it for slide, or do you want to sort of build off of these slides, Tony? We're sort of open to discussion.
Yeah, I'll put these questions in the chat so that yes, so we can take down the slide and we can actually see one another. But these are just questions that we wanted to offer up. I think it like sometimes can feel a little formal and less straightforward to be like, what? Give us edits for the plan. And more like let's orient this discussion around like what risk management and hazard mitigation topics are you the most interested in? Like what concerns are you seeing come up in your work or your community or sort of like what issues, particularly those that are cross-cutting, that are like touching multiple disciplines, like should we be thinking about? And then yes, we did add that question on like maybe more specifically if there's any speakers or topics you'd want to see in a future public meeting that the risk management hazard mitigation team puts on. Anna actually just joined, so like I won't put her on the spot right now, but as Tom said, she's done a lot of work spearheading that speaker series. What I will do is I know we popped up that slide that'll be in the recording, obviously, of meetings that were held in spring 2025 and fall 2024, but also another easy place to see the risk team meeting recordings is on our YouTube channel. So what I just put in the chat is a link to our risks team playlist on YouTube, so you can go through and see all those previous meetings. But to circle back to this next portion of the agenda, that was a lot of me just talking, but wanted to really open things up. Informal discussion, again, just sort of like what is top of mind to you when it comes to risks and hazards. And I think maybe that's a good place to start the discussion. And I think from that, we'll be able to kind of like tease out like, okay, so here's some themes or issues that maybe we want to consider for the next plan. Um, and maybe before I do show, maybe I should, Anna, if you want to do like a very quick intro. We did a round of intros when we first got on, so everyone had a chance to just do like name, affiliation. Oh, and I see we've got one other person joining, but maybe if I could pass it over to you just to say a quick hello.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. Anna Lidahl, based out of Homer with Woodwell Climate Research Center and also affiliate with UAF and permafrost hydrology. I lead the Permafrost Discovery Gateway project where we create big data and also make that big data accessible with the Arctic, together with the Arctic Data Center. And yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Anna. And Kim, I know you just joined. We did a round of verbal intros at the top of the call, just name, affiliation, since we're a smaller group today. So just wanted to give the opportunity to just a very quick hello, if that feels good, and then we can move into our discussion.
Thanks, Tony. That does feel good. Um, so my name is Kim Derry, and I am the researcher risk advisor for the National Science Foundation Office of Polar Programs through a direct contract. So I work really closely with the contractors in the Arctic and Antarctic programs, and also with the research communities and academic institutions and all the other stakeholders. So I cover a pretty broad range of communities that all intersect in ways to manage field risk and promote safety in the field. My academic background is medical anthropology, and research that I've conducted has mostly been in Greenland. And but now I'm currently serving in this role, and I've been working in the polar programs for over 30 years. So, and I still have a lot to learn. So I'm really glad to be here. Thanks.
Yes, thank you. Thanks for joining. Thanks for the intro. And Kim, I don't know if you can see, Zoom has made so many updates. If you can see the previous links and comments and things in the chat, but I had popped in kind of like our discussion questions and just things to noodle on that help might like prompt some thoughts from folks. So you may or may not be able to see those in the chat.
Thanks. I don't see them.
Okay, I'll pop those in one more time. And as I do, again, invite any kind of initial thoughts or even questions from our leads, from our attendees, just things that are interesting that you want to learn more about. Um, oh, and Rebecca, I see that you've got a question in here. So maybe before I pop in um, the
Not
discussion questions
not
again, I
really
could.
a question, but just trying to answer some of those questions you posted. Thanks, Tony.
Yeah. Yeah. You said interested best practices for sustainable community engagement and outreach to address risk management, hazard mitigation. Impressed with the Cootie project results. Yep, but concerned about plans for sustaining the iterative process of co-produced knowledge. Yep, perfect. So I just wanted to, I know everyone can see it, but for the purposes of
Yeah,
the recording, anybody who
thank
might
you.
be watching back, so they
I
can.
appreciate it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And thank you, Anna, for reposting those discussion questions. Um, does anybody have any other any initial thoughts or reactions to what Rebecca posed?
I agree with you on the Q2 project. They've been super impressive. And I mean, they've been working on Southeast Alaska on landslide hazard for a decade. And yeah, they're really grounded in what the community needs. So I agree. You have lots to learn from them. So I think I'm wondering, so one my personal favorite topic is like how we can AI is all over the place now is the kind of a hip word, but I do think there's a lot that's the tool that can help us bring together different kinds of data and especially big data, and at the same time also the knowledge and experiences that we have in the communities. So I'm wondering if for the presentation, the webinar series to mm, that could be two kind of legs we could stand on is to have the community being there to bring the applied aspect of the science because we could geek out on the fundamentals part, but I think the community can help us ground that science into what could be helpful for local communities. So we have that connection. Um, so I would be keen to have some presentations on different way AI can be used to both empower science and also communities to better respond to hazards that we see in Alaska, in the Arctic. And that could be a work that's already done or literally panels where there's like a brainstorming session and we have some specific questions that we ask for to the panelists. Because I think that's another benefit of IARPIC community is that we have people with many different backgrounds and experiences, and a panel could be a really neat way to blend that together as opposed to just having one presenter and then a little time for questions.
Definitely. Yeah, I think that's something in the IARPIC space with several of our teams and communities, folks are thinking about like, what does this mean for their line of work? How to potentially highlight what work is being done or even just considered in IARPIC public meetings, like just how to use this space. And I think earlier in even this week, I think it was during one of our listening sessions, talking about like, is there would it be fruitful to call out AI more explicitly in the next plan and have that be a focus? So there is a lot of discussion right now, and I don't know if anybody else on this call is like has seen cool applications or maybe they're not applications yet, but ideas for application because I think a lot of calls I've been on is we're still sort of at a mining stage of like what do people know about? Like what are even the possibilities, even if they're not actualized yet? So I don't know if anybody has seen or heard anything interesting that they would want to share.
Yeah, one example I could bring up, so large language models are probably the most mature versus have incorporating, you know, I mean, you can, there's Grok and there's Google. Gmail has an AI where you can create a figure and a photo, and I think that's that has a lot of maturity left. But the large language models I think are there for us. So one example of an application that I learned about earlier and I tried out a little bit and I was super impressed was in the agriculture sector, especially regenerative agriculture. There is a team that have developed an AI tool where you can ask questions about, you have a photo of your plant and you say, what's the problem with my plant? What is the disease and how can I mitigate it? And or you can upload your soil test and from your garden and ask what kind of amendment should I add to create a better environment for the plants and produce tastier carrots, for example. And I was super impressed with interaction with it and the simplicity of it because I think the AI can be a tool for people who are super geeky and nerdy on a very narrow thing. And it can also be a tool for someone who has just heard about the word permafrost and what is it? And it it I think it can enable access. So you don't need to have these gazillion buttons that you find in ArcGIS for people to interact with map data. You can pose a question. Where does permafrost exist? And it would pull up information from the literature and people's presentations, whatever you can find on the archive that you're kind of pointing the AI tool to read from. So I think that would be a really neat application that I'm hoping like one day we will get with the Permafrost Discovery Gateway is that people can write a prompt and learn together with the AI and about the landscape and no matter what background you have. It's called Field Lark. I put it in the link in the chat, and then it's have 30 free trials, and you don't have to sign up, put any credit card or anything in there. But it's kind of a cool way to just see how we can work.
Cool. Yeah, thanks for sharing. I like what you said about the um, simplicity element is like it's one thing if you're like really deep in like the data science, computer science. I mean, I honestly myself consider myself one of these like lay people who are like, I know AI is powerful and I fully wrapping my mind around it, it can be tricky. So it's like, how do we make it usable for like leverageable and usable for anyone without having to be like needing a degree on it, I guess.
Yeah, well, and the term AI has been used for everything from large language models to much more specific things that are, tools like plant identification or bird identification or whatever, many of which work really well. And don't tend to hallucinate, or at least if they aren't sure, they kind of say, well, it could be this or it could be that bird, and then you got to figure it out from there. Um, so as long as this is trained on stuff that's accurate and up to date. So if somebody asks, where's permafrost? Well, if you're looking at something from 1950, it's going to say there's permafrost a lot of places where there is not permafrost now. As a matter of fact, if you're looking, and then of course there's the whole depth thing. But I mean, if you're looking at something from 2010, I can show you places where that map would be inaccurate already. And obviously there's questions of scale and stuff to make it, applicable for communities and particularly for individuals. And like, where do you put the road? Well, you really do need to have pretty fine scale information if you're citing roads, if you're, I don't know, but yeah, so I think the sort of thing that's, not an LLM, but something much more constrained and trained would be great. Because we do need ways to communicate risks and hazards You can't mitigate risks. You can't manage hazards if people don't accept that they exist in the community. And, I've been at a number of meetings in Utqiagvik, because I'm working on several projects that involve permafrost and engineering and, whatever. And it's interesting that there's a spread of things from someone who's almost an elder, but an older person who has come to the conclusion that based on what she's seeing from the science and the people she's talking to, the community is going to need to move, and probably in less than 50 years. So the question becomes, when do you need to move, and how do you step back? And other people who are like, yeah, no, it's no big deal. Of course, she's not a politician. And so, but we need ways to communicate information to communities without scaring them so much that they just go, oh, no, 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 and don't pay attention. And then, I mean, you can know what the hazards are, you can know how you could manage or mitigate them, but if people locally don't accept it, I mean, obviously, the more you can involve local people in actually doing the work, the more that's going to spread organically into the community in terms of information. They'll talk to, yeah, what did you do at work today? Well, and then they're going, oh, Jimmy was, and my gosh, the permafrost all melted under all the houses along the bluff, and they're going to fall down, and then people start thinking a little. So, that's something that we really maybe need to figure out a way to do. We need to figure out a way to do that and get the various federal agencies on board with that, because there are some federal agencies who are busily denying that there's any problems. I mean, I remember a DOD thing where, oh no, none of these things are going to fall over the edge, none of these old dew line sites, none of these old dew line dumps. And, yeah, right. I mean, that was very incorrect, shall we say. And, so nothing got done about them when they could have done it without massive damage, because they didn't want to believe it.
So how about a panel on focusing on communicating these hazards? Like, how do you present it to a community? Because in the Arctic T-SLIP, Arctic Tsunami Slope Stability Partnership, which is related, the QT has this region specific in Southeast Alaska, and Arctic T-SLIP is more bigger regional scale, and we've had a couple of community meetings this fall, 4 of them: Cordova, Yakutat, Homer, Seward, and we definitely run into the challenges of communicating this hazard. And in many places, people have already been aware to some extent, and in other places, it's been kind of like a little bit of a surprise to them. So I think having a panel with people who have engaged and tried to do this already, and who have learned from mistakes and from successes, I think that would really be really neat. So if you guys here have contacts that you could think of, someone that would be great to have on a panel and could share their perspectives, and it could be someone that's coming from the science community, or it could be someone who lives in one of these communities and have be more of the receiver of the science information. And I think that would be really neat. We could set up something there.
Yeah, and there are people who, have studied and specialize in hazard communication, not necessarily in the Arctic, but, involving that. We often tend to silo ourselves and not get, what might be useful information from non-Arctic people. Now, sometimes they don't completely get the whole issue, but particularly if, we could find somebody that had, worked with more rural communities, even if they were not native or northern, that might be helpful. And give us some different perspectives than anything that, people are currently trying.
Yeah, and I just wanted to voice, I know as we were chatting, Rebecca put a couple things in the chat. So again, just for kind of the recording's sake and make sure that's part of the conversation, Rebecca just noted that hope the fundamentals of person-to-person interaction will also be addressed. Put a link to a community engagement and accountability toolkit from the Red Cross, I believe, in the chat. And then also how can these established methods be applied to slow-moving disasters like the increasing vulnerability of community sites, addressing the need to move whole communities. And a follow up on optimistic that FEMA was coming around to recognizing slow moving community disasters, but not so much anymore. Um, so just wanted to include that as part of the conversation. And Tom, I know a little while ago you'd come off mute and went back on, so wanted to see if there was a thought you wanted to add on this line of
I
inquiry.
mean, unfortunately, it would be a little bit of a derailing of what we're talking about. I guess the first thing I'd say is, yeah, it would be cool to get a sort of Anne suggests somebody that can sort of deal with community discussions and whatnot. And I know it can get it can get to be a pretty deep discussion within the community as well. Like, should we move? Should we? What should we do about the school here and there? I do wonder if probably for the next couple of years, the post Halong recovery is probably going to suck up most of the air in the room. And so I guess as a group that's interested in risks and hazards, not to at all say what the folks are going through out there is not a big deal because it really is. But there are other villages that are dealing with this slow and steady, where there maybe isn't a tipping point they can talk to or show that isn't quite as dramatic. And I'm not sure how to kind of amplify sort of those voices as well, if you know what I'm getting at. Like, a crazy flood and a building flows away is really dramatic and hard to ignore and gets a lot of attention. But someone saying, sort of like Anne said, hey, in 10 years, the coast has retreated this much, and in 10 more years, that building's going to be gone. It's harder to get people to rally around that because they say basically, oh, so in 9 years, we got to do something, right? Anyway, as we go about these discussions, I kind of think about that. And even I don't think Maribok was as much damage as how long, but for a couple years there was crazy amounts of interest in that, and then that's kind of just sort of died away. Maybe the various solutions were addressed, people mapped the various things, and again, I don't think it was quite as wasn't at all as damaging, dramatic, and dangerous. But yeah, there's a lot of needs out there, I guess.
Well, the building floating away in a flood thing, you'd think that would like get attention and keep attention. There's some nice pictures from 1963 storm in Barrow, as it was then called, where there are buildings floating away. And I had students in my class. I did a lot of archaeology with high school students. I had students who had never even heard of it, and they had grown up their entire life there. Most people are completely oblivious to that. It really wasn't until we were excavating and wound up, just because of the way erosion worked, actually going deeper than we had been, because mostly we were trying to, cover a eroding graveyard, that we ran into a Imputax site. So actually dating for 300 to 400 AD. Well, the thing about this site was that it was covered by about a meter of gravel before you got to the layer that the later people had been on. And as far as Owen Mason could tell, this was one or possibly two storm events that dumped that entire meter of gravel. The other thing was when we excavated out the remains of, well, the house was gone, but we had kind of the front yard, if you will. There were sled runners. There were boat paddles. Now, and Iputac made big, heavy carved sled runners out of logs, so they needed a lot of wood, which you don't got a lot of in, coastal extreme North Alaska. So as best we could tell, the people that had lived there didn't come and get these things because they couldn't, because there's no way in God's green earth they would have left that behind if they could have gotten back there. And that kind of really woke up those students, but it, and I mean, we belabored it in talks in the community and everything. But, I mean, you can't keep talking about the same project over and over. It just kind of goes out of people's minds again. So it's a real challenge. And I don't know what the answer is, but it's pretty impressive. And they built a bunch more stuff in areas that were flooded during the 63 flood. And sea level has, of course, gone up since the 63 flood, and the coast has eroded. So, very bad. But there we are.
I think those are great topics to have in mind, Tony, when we put together some presenters, all these topics.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and we've got the recording and we'll jot some notes down too from the discussion. So appreciate the input and ideas. Um, I know we've got like 4 minutes to the top of the hour, so we got a little bit of time, and I wanted to make sure that if there's anyone who hasn't had an opportunity to share anything that they would like to or ask a question that they want to just put out into the space, we do have a few more minutes.
I had a quick question.
Yeah.
Anna and Tom, I mean, you've done such a great job putting together a speaker series. And I feel like you've reached a stage. I mean, I really like the idea of you putting together a panel. I'm just curious about, what other kinds of products. I don't mean everyone's busy to do more work for you guys, but, is there other like opportunities to do like some kind of high level dashboard or one pager type of communications about just the impacts of all of these research on risks and impacts from these hazards, either slow or rapid response type of things. Just again to keep Alaska and its issues pertinent, because the whole of the US is dealing with very many risks. And even with how long, we didn't get a lot of national coverage right off the bat either. So again, just kind of putting out there to see if there's opportunities to kind of rally the community to do some other kind of like wrap up small product or deliverable in addition to these speaker series. Thanks.
Do you want to start, Anna? I'm not totally clear what the question was, but
Yeah, I can start. Yeah, I think, Olivia, I think it's absolutely. I think the webinar series is kind of like an easy one because Tony does all the orchestrating of rallying the crowd and get the word out, and Tom, we just get the people and the questions, the panelists. So at a relatively low investment of time from our end. The otherwise, I think that listening to what you're saying, Olivia, like it could be a commentary article, for example, and that I think is just anyone can come and step up and take a lead on that. It doesn't have to be the team leads for this working group at all. It could be anyone that have the passion and time to do that. So I think there's definitely space, and that would be valuable. So yeah, if you have some other ideas on things, or if you even have time to maybe spearhead some of it, that'd be awesome. Because I think there's lots to do.
one quick comment I'll make, no offense to ARPIC, but because it's sort of a federal government thing, there's lots of reviews. And I mean, Tony and Serena, I'm not trying to harsh on ARPIC, but like it might be difficult for literally IARPIC to put something out. That said, we can get speakers together, we can get groups together, we can get ideas, we can help pollinate things, and then individual PIs or groups can go do their thing. Tony and Serena, I didn't really explain that probably super well, but you know what I'm getting at? Like if today we said, the risk team wants to publish a white paper, we're probably talking what, 6 to 8 months of approvals and edits and blah blah blah, right? Bit of time.
Yeah, I see the point you're making, and I would underscore too that the our main goal of this space is like an opportunity to bring folks together and like Tom said, maybe like pollinate ideas and share. So we are thinking about like what are the ways that IARPIC collaborations like can be that space. So even if it's like hosting more, something we're exploring more is like using public meetings like this, not always as like here's a presentation, but it's like wholly a discussion. Like we bring people in to share what they know is happening or what they're working on. and like how can we like source from the community and be a place where ideas can come together, and then like Tom said, maybe like someone can sort of carry the torch, use that as inspiration to like produce other products. Um, yeah, Serena, is there anything you would add to that?
No, I think that was spot on. And I hear what you're saying, Tom, and I agree with you.
Yeah, and Tom had to hop. So I know we are at the top of the hour. I know folks have to jump. Rebecca, I didn't know if you wanted to speak to your last comment in here and close this out.
I think I want to mention that there are other resources, including Professor Luann Picard, who is I'd love to rope her in as an expert in project management and stakeholder management in particular, um, because I believe those skills would be beneficial to addressing this topic area in many places in Alaska. And I'll leave that there.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for, we'll have it in the info in the chat. Thanks for bringing Luann's name into the space as a resource. Maybe we can we'll look further through the chat. I know a lot of good things were shared in here, so maybe some of the links I'll put on the event page just so we've got somewhere to refer back to them. But I know I'm keeping everybody over at this point, but thank you again for joining, for being part of the discussion, listening in. Helping us think about the future of IARPC, the plan, but also just like the space in general. I think it's always just like helpful to hear kind of like what we can be thinking about moving forward. So happy holidays, everybody, and we'll probably chat with you all in the new year.
Happy holidays. Merry Christmas. Bye-bye.